It does not get any more classic than Fender and Marshall when it comes to guitar amplifiers. Fender versus Marshall, the heavyweight classic tone shootout that, well, none of you might have been actually waiting for, but I'd like to think that in your heart of hearts you've always been waiting for. All right, so today we've got a Fender Super Sonic 22 versus a Marshall JVM. This is new to my arsenal, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's a wonderful amplifier. Now, today we are focusing on classic tones, and I think that's important to mention because both of these amps do a lot more than I'm going to show in this video. We're focusing on clean, a little bit of edge of breakup, and then into a moderate gain sort of territory. Now, it sounds, a good thick lead kind of tone. However, in the context of both of these amps, they've got a lot more on tap, particularly the Marshall. Tell me that doesn't surprise you. Now, I'll be totally honest with you. You could say that this is a video where one amp is punching down. That would be the JVM punching down to the Super Sonic. The JVM is pretty much top of the line when it comes to Marshall amplifiers. The Super Sonic is more middle of the road. I will say that the Super Sonic is a great amplifier. And it is one of the more modern Fender amplifiers, so as far as classic tones go, okay, why would I pick this one? Well, really because this is one of the higher end of Fender's line of amplifiers that is channel switching and does kind of a combination of great vintage and great modern tones. This one is kind of inspired by some of the Fender Rivera era amplifiers where Fender was getting into dual channel with one overdrive channel, kind of trying to compete with Mesa Boogie. The Marshall JVM really encapsulates pretty much anything you'd ever want from a Marshall amplifier. Now, most of the players of the JVM are going to be high gain players. That's pretty much all I see online is people using the Marshall JVM for really high gain stuff. However, this is easily one of the best Marshalls I've ever heard for clean to moderate to classic distortion tones. This amp just does everything, and it does it beautifully. So why would I say it would surprise you? Well, on that note, the Marshall JVM Clean really stands up to the Fender. I would also say that the Fender Drive really stands up to the Marshall. It would be very easy to see this video and kind of go, oh, well, Fender for clean and Marshall for drive, right? That's the obvious answer for most people. But I would say that each really hold their own in the other one's territory, so to speak. So we are focusing on the classic tones. Today I'm using a combination of a Fender Stratocaster and a Gibson Les Paul. You've already heard a little bit of clean and heavier lead tones. I was also using a Wampler Metaverse going into the effects loops of both amplifiers. Next we're going to hear it clean, mild overdrive with a Stratocaster, and then fully overdriven, and again I say fully in context, with the Les Paul. I'm also going to use the Les Paul for the clean tones. And many of you might say, well, why not use the Stratocaster for the clean tones? Well, you've already heard the Stratocaster for some clean tones, and I will tell you, Boy, that Les Paul sounds great clean on both of these amplifiers, particularly the Marshall. The Marshall cleans on this really, really surprised me. People don't tend to think about Marshall as a great clean amplifier. This amp sounds fantastic clean. Now, this is not a sponsored review. I've never done any sort of work with Marshall when it comes to reviews. However, one of my pride and joys is a congratulations letter from the president of Marshall, which was from my Blues Masters experience. I have worked with Fender doing reviews several times before. However, this is not associated with them. So I have no skin in the game when it comes to these. I have always been more of a Fender player, and I will say I am much more critical when it comes to Marshall amplifiers. When it comes to Fender, most of the time, if I'm playing through a Fender amp, I'm a happy camper. Marshalls, I'm very, very critical of. Lower end Marshalls, I'm very much like, oh, no, pass, thank you. But when it comes to a high-end, good Marshall tone, there is really nothing like the JVM that I've ever played. So let's get back to some tone here. Once again, just want to reiterate, I would not look at this so much as a specific model-to-model comparison. I'm looking at this more as Fender versus Marshall, who does classic tone better, as opposed to Marshall JVM versus Fender Super Sonic 22. I'm using them to represent the broader picture of the tones of these lines of amplifiers. Now, you've got your classic EL34s, of course, with the JVM, whereas this particular Fender, the Super Sonic 22, has 6 V6s, which is representative of a good section of classic Fender amplifiers, but many of the classic Fender amplifiers also use 6 L6s. That's something worth mentioning, but when it comes to the drive tones, many of the classic Fender drives have come from 6 V6s. So let us know, what do you think in the comments? What do you think of the results of this video? What do you use in general? Do you favor Fender? Do you favor Marshall? Do you favor something else? I mentioned that this is about as classic as you can get, and I would stick to that as far as an argument goes. You know, there's certainly some other great classic amplifiers out there that have been responsible for many great tones in rock history, and I'm not trying to discount them, but I think when you look at the two pinnacles of classic rock guitar tones, you're probably looking at Fender and Marshall. Just like with guitars, you're probably looking at Fender and Gibson. With acoustic guitars, you're probably looking at Martin and Taylor. List goes on and on. There's certainly tons of other great companies out there, but there tend to be the big two that compete with each other, and I think it's these two. Stick around for some more tones. I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.